Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 28th of May, comes to you from London. And we've been closed in the UK and the US for yesterday for a long weekend, so we're back after 3 days. And first of all, we'll start looking at the dollar index. Still bearish below the cloud on the short-term chart, but we still have more upside targets than downside targets. And so this is still a basing pattern looking pretty strong to the upside, and of course the medium and long-term charts are bullish. So we expect any weakness in the dollar to be fairly short-lived. The Eurodollar this morning is down, but again, bearish in the medium and long term with a lot of downside targets. Very hard to ignore this. 5 downside targets on that short-term chart does tell us that we should expect the euro to go lower. The yen against the dollar, we're seeing the dollar is a weaker here, and we're just starting to enter medium-term bearish. So it's not all positive for the dollar. The yen still the stronger currency. Sterling falling over the last couple of weeks quite sharply against the US dollar. The political situation in the UK becoming more and more complex. Now we've got a new leadership race for Prime Minister in the UK, and still lots of uncertainty with Brexit and the recent European election results. So sterling still subdued at this the 126.75 level this morning. Looking against the euro, we're seeing sterling also weaker here as well, and against the Swiss franc also we're seeing they're weaker. The Against the Aussie dollar, we're seeing sterling lower as well. Bitcoin sitting at $8,705. We had a big jump on the 26th, so that was Sunday. We saw a big jump from 8,000 up to 8,800. So we're just climbing the hill all the time, and Bitcoin coming back here. So we are seeing some downside targets from this, just the recent high, but at the moment Bitcoin looking more and more bullish. Ever since we saw that big jump at the start of April, Bitcoin has started to perform and hold on to the gains. The S&P on Friday was a little changed. We can see here we're still bearish on the short-term chart, and the Nasdaq is also still bearish. The Dow also short-term bearish as well, and the Russell 2000 is also in bearish territory. The futures this morning little changed on the S&P future, and the Nasdaq E-mini 0.1% higher, so a bit hard to read which way the markets will open. We're seeing Europe higher this morning. The UK blue chip index up 0.2% and into bullish territory, unlike the US, just bucking the trend a bit there. Midcaps little change this morning and still in bearish territory on the short-term chart. We can see here. Looking at the DAX, we see this morning we're also short-term bearish, trying to get more bullish. But we're hitting this long-term resistance for the DAX at the moment, and the CAC 40 also short-term bearish and just struggling on that longer-term chart. The Nikkei was up 0.25% in Japan, the 400 index, and looking at the Hang Seng, we see here we were also up 0.2%. So Asia mixed in terms of just being up, and we're seeing here also the Shanghai index up 0.6%. So still bearish on that short-term chart, little change there. India's had a very good run lately. It's off 0.2% this morning, but after the Modi elections, India's still bullish on all 3 time frames with multiple upside targets, still looking very strong indeed. And the ASX, the Australian index, up 0.5%. Brent crude sitting down 0.5% this morning at 69.79. Just can't quite get back above that $70 mark, but we are turning into short-term bullish at the moment. We're hitting some long-term resistance though on the cloud, and if we look at WTI, it's bucking that trend. We're up 0.4% this morning, but still bearish on the short term. US nat gas sitting at $2.58, down 0.5% and not moving much higher there. Gold sitting at 12.83, and that's looking bullish on the short-term chart, but still has work to do on that medium and long-term picture. Silver similarly down 0.5%. US 10-year yields sitting at 2.29%, so we're in the 220s, making new lows, and that's really now the first time we've seen that level since 2017. So we're heading for 2-year lows here. So yields looking bearish. The outlook for interest rates in the US still bearish. Quite a change from where we were at the start of the year. Looking at the individual stocks on Friday, we saw on the Dow the best performer was Boeing, and we see here the Boeing chart um, still bearish on that medium term, and McDonald's was the worst performer, down 0.6%, so not massive changes there. On the Nasdaq, we saw the Intuit was the best performer, up 6.7%, so that really did do very well. And on the downside, we saw Autodesk down 4.9%. Looking at the Aussie market, the best performer being Worley Parsons Limited, up 7.8%, and the chart really just going sideways there for the last few months. And on the downside, we saw Fisher and Paykel Healthcare down 5%, so they really have had a bit of a sell-off there, but still the chart looking pretty bullish and outperforming the Dow Jones so far this year by 9%. China, we saw a fairly mixed picture. We were up 0.6%, so we had quite a lot of stocks rising, only really about 10 stocks down. And on the Nifty in India, we saw Z Entertainment, they were the best performer, up 4.8%, but the chart's still looking pretty bad, and we see here the relative to Dow, we're down 30% on the Dow Jones this year so far. The worst performer was Bharati Infratel, and again that chart not looking great either. Taking a look at the European market at the open, we took a look at the FTSE 100. We see here Rio Tinto Group, they're up 3%, and if we look at the downside, we see Smurfit Kappa down 1.5% this morning, not looking great on the chart. Here we see the live prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. Looking at the 250, we had Galliford Try, they're up 6% this morning. They've got a bit of action going on with Bovis, and interestingly, that's not really changing the picture of the chart. And we look at the downside, we've got Acacia Mining there down 4%. Interesting to see there in the best performers, we had Metro Bank as well. They're up 4.6%, a little bit of a relief rally, but still a terrible looking chart, and underperforming the market still by 60% this year against the Dow Jones. Across to Europe, the main players in the Stoxx 50, we see Volkswagen, they're up 0.65% this morning. On the downside, we've got Intesa, they're down 1.6%. We're seeing quite a lot of banks' shares being hit in Europe this morning. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.